It's strange how a single memory can haunt you for years, not because of what happened, but because of how powerless you felt in that moment. Whenever I think about that night, the one where everything changed, I can still feel the same sting in my chest, the same taste of humiliation on my tongue, and that same sick, twisting feeling in my stomach. But before I tell you about that night, I need to take you back a few years, to a version of me that I almost don't recognize anymore. In 2011, I was 23 years old, fresh out of college, and filled with that kind of restless ambition that only youth and desperation can give you. I'd just graduated from the University of Michigan with a degree in business administration, though if I'm being honest, I wasn't entirely sure what I wanted to do with it. I had this vague dream of starting my own company someday, something that would make my parents proud and finally make me feel like I'd done something meaningful, but dreams like that are cheap when you're broke. So I took the first job that came my way, a marketing assistant at a small firm in downtown Detroit. The company wasn't anything glamorous. We did brand management for mid-sized clients, local restaurants, small automotive suppliers, that kind of thing. But to me, it was everything. It was my first step into the real world, and I was determined to prove that I could make it. That's where I met her, Lauren Davis. She was 2 years older than me, confident, sharp-tongued, and had this uncanny ability to make everyone in the room listen when she spoke. She worked as a senior marketing executive, which basically meant she was my boss's right-hand person, and by extension, mine too. At first, I admired her. She had this poise that made her seem untouchable, like she'd already figured out how to navigate life while the rest of us were still fumbling in the dark. But admiration has a funny way of turning into something else, especially when power is involved. Lauren wasn't cruel at first. She was just intimidating. The kind of person who made you double-check your work, reread your emails 3 times, and rehearse what you were going to say before speaking up in meetings. She had this knack for finding flaws, and making sure everyone else noticed them too. I told myself it was just her way of pushing people to do better. That's what I wanted to believe. I remember my first real project. It was a pitch for a small, eco-friendly cleaning brand trying to expand regionally. I'd stayed up almost 2 nights straight preparing the deck, doing research and polishing every slide until it looked perfect. When I presented it, I was nervous, but proud. And for a brief second, I thought I saw Lauren nod in approval. Then she tore it apart. Not privately, not kindly, but right there in front of the entire team. She picked apart every single thing. The font choice, the color scheme, the tone of the copy. Everything. It wasn't constructive criticism. It was mockery. The kind that leaves you feeling small, embarrassed, and unsure whether to defend yourself or disappear. Everyone laughed a little. Awkwardly, nervously, like they weren't sure if they were supposed to. I laughed too, just to hide how much it stung. But when I got home that night, I sat in my car for half an hour staring at the dashboard, wondering if I'd made a mistake choosing this path at all. That moment, as trivial as it sounds now, was the beginning of everything. Over the next few months, Lauren made it clear that she didn't think much of me. Every success I had was downplayed. Every mistake was amplified. She had this way of saying my name, slow, condescending, as if just hearing it annoyed her. She wasn't overtly cruel. She was subtle. That's what made it worse. It was the quiet digs, the sarcastic smiles, the way she'd joke about how I'd never survive in a real corporate environment. And yet, I stayed. Because deep down, I wanted to prove her wrong. Detroit winters have a way of making you introspective. Those long, gray mornings where the world feels silent under a layer of snow. I'd sit by the window of my apartment, drinking cheap instant coffee, thinking about how far I was from the life I'd imagined. My father used to say, "Don't let anyone write your story for you." But at that time it felt like Lauren had already grabbed the pen and started writing me as the fool. Still, I learned from her. I learned how to handle clients, how to manage accounts, how to stay calm when someone tried to push your buttons. In a twisted way, she was shaping me into something stronger, though neither of us knew it then. By 2013, I'd been promoted to account manager. Not because Lauren wanted it. She actually tried to block it, claiming I wasn't ready, but because one of my campaigns had gone viral online. A small Detroit-based food chain saw a 60% rise in sales after our ad ran, and the client specifically mentioned me in the follow-up call. The upper management took notice. Lauren didn't congratulate me. She didn't even acknowledge it. But I could see it in her eyes. The irritation. The quiet resentment. That's when I started noticing something. She was losing her grip. Her once commanding presence started to waver. She began missing deadlines, snapping at people for small mistakes, and spreading herself too thin. Rumors circulated that she'd broken up with her boyfriend, that she was drinking too much, that she was trying too hard to maintain her image. I didn't take pleasure in it, not yet. Part of me still pitied her, but the dynamic between us shifted. For the first time, she wasn't untouchable. Then came the night that would burn itself into my memory forever, the company's annual gala in late 2013. It was held at a fancy event space overlooking the Detroit River. Everyone was dressed up, the champagne was flowing, and for once, I felt like I belonged. I'd just wrapped a major client deal that had brought in a record profit, and my manager, not Lauren, had hinted that I was being considered for a senior position. That night, I remember thinking maybe, just maybe, I'd earned her respect. But I was wrong. Very wrong. Because humiliation, I would learn, often comes when you least expect it, when you're standing tall, unaware that someone's already waiting to pull the ground from beneath you. I can still hear the music that played that night. A cover band, doing an upbeat version of Rolling in the Deep. I can still remember the smell of cologne, wine, and expensive perfume mixing in the air. Everyone was relaxed, laughing, dancing. And in the middle of it all, Lauren was there, smiling, a glass of red wine in her hand, eyes gleaming with something I couldn't read at the time. By the end of that evening, my reputation, the one I'd worked years to build, would be shattered, and she'd make sure everyone was watching when it happened. I've replayed that night in my head hundreds of times, like a bad movie you can't stop watching, hoping that maybe, if you look close enough, you'll notice a detail you missed before. Some clue, some warning sign that could have told me what was about to happen. But there wasn't one. The night started perfectly. I remember arriving early, around 7, dressed in a charcoal gray suit that I'd spent way too much money on. The kind of suit that made you feel like you belonged somewhere bigger than you were. The event hall glowed under soft amber lights, the kind that made everyone look a little more important than they really were. Tables covered in white linen, glasses clinking, people smiling. It felt like a celebration of everything I'd been fighting for. When my manager, Peter, gave his opening toast, he singled me out in front of everyone. He talked about how my latest project had redefined the firm's creative direction, how my ideas brought in a new kind of energy. Everyone clapped. I felt my face flush, that nervous, awkward pride bubbling up inside me. I glanced over and saw Lauren watching. Her lips curved in a faint smile that I couldn't quite read. For a second, I thought maybe the rivalry had finally settled into mutual respect. I couldn't have been more wrong. As the night went on, the drinks kept flowing. People danced, loosened up, laughed too loudly. The kind of corporate event that pretends to be classy but always ends with someone crying in the bathroom or confessing too much to the wrong person. Around 9, Lauren came up to me with a drink in her hand and congratulated me. Her tone was light, almost playful. She said I'd finally learned how to market something without screwing it up. Everyone nearby laughed. I smiled. That tight, fake kind of smile you wear when you're not sure if you're being complimented or insulted. I told myself not to make a big deal of it. Not tonight, but that was just the warm-up. About an hour later, when the crowd had thinned a bit and the music turned slower, Lauren gathered a few people near the open bar, mostly senior staff, a few clients, and even Peter. I didn't notice at first. I was chatting with one of the interns. Then I heard my name, loud enough to pull my attention. Lauren was telling a story, something about a presentation gone wrong. my presentation, the one from my first month at the company. She reenacted how I'd stuttered, how I'd mixed up two brand names, how I'd spilled coffee on my notes that morning. The crowd around her roared with laughter, and then, as if that wasn't enough, she imitated my nervous voice, exaggerated every movement, made it sound like I was a complete idiot. Everyone laughed again. Peter tried to wave her off, saying it was old news, but she didn't stop. She went on, turning it into a full performance. She said something about how some people only succeed because luck occasionally feels sorry for them. I remember freezing. My chest went tight, my throat dry. The worst part wasn't her words. It was the laughter, that hollow, echoing laughter that seemed to come from every corner of the room. People who'd shaken my hand minutes before were now chuckling like I was the punchline of some inside joke. My ears rang. My vision tunneled. I could feel the heat rising in my face, that helpless mix of embarrassment and anger that you can't control. And Lauren, she just stood there, basking in it, like she'd waited years for that moment. I tried to laugh it off, pretend it didn't bother me, but it was too late. The damage was done. I could feel my reputation, the one I'd spent years building, slipping through my fingers in real time. The rest of the night was a blur. I remember leaving early, pretending to get a call, just so I could walk out without looking like I was running away. I drove home in silence, my knuckles white around the steering wheel, the echo of that laughter still ringing in my ears. It was snowing lightly, the kind of quiet snowfall that should have felt peaceful, but it didn't. It felt suffocating. When I got home, I sat on the couch in the dark for a long time. I didn't even take off my coat. I just sat there, replaying every word she'd said, every laugh that followed. I kept thinking, why? What did I ever do to deserve that? I'd worked hard, I'd kept my head down, I'd respected her even when she belittled me. So why humiliate me like that? And in front of everyone. In the weeks that followed, the atmosphere at work shifted. It's strange how fast people change around you once you've been publicly humiliated. Conversations stopped when I entered a room. People avoided eye contact. Some were kind. Overly kind. Like they pitied me. Others treated me like I was invisible. I wasn't invited to meetings anymore. Wasn't CC'd on emails I should have been part of. Lauren, meanwhile, acted like nothing had happened. She even started calling me Kiddo. That nickname. It burned. I considered quitting more times than I can count, but something inside me refused. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was spite. Maybe I just didn't want her to win. I told myself I'd stay until I found something better, something that would make her name mean nothing to me. By mid-2014, I'd started looking for other opportunities. I applied everywhere. Agencies, startups, even freelance gigs. Rejections piled up, each one a little more discouraging than the last. I started doubting myself. Maybe she was right. Maybe I really wasn't cut out for this. But then, in the middle of all that rejection, I got a call from a small tech startup in Chicago, a company called NovaStream. They were developing cloud-based analytics tools for marketing agencies. The pay wasn't great, but the role was creative, flexible, and, most importantly, far away from Detroit. So I packed up everything I owned into my old Honda and drove to Chicago with nothing but a suitcase and a stubborn sense of purpose. The next few years were tough. Startups are chaos. Long hours, low pay, constant uncertainty. But for the first time in a long while, I felt like I belonged somewhere. The team was young, hungry, ambitious. They didn't care where I came from or who had laughed at me once. They cared about results. And I delivered. By 2016, NovaStream had grown exponentially. We'd landed our first big client, a Fortune 500 company. And suddenly investors were interested. I was promoted to Director of Strategy. The long nights, the stress, the endless trial and error, it all started to pay off. Then came 2018, the turning point of my career. We secured a massive round of funding and decided to rebrand the company. New name, new identity. I was given full creative control. It felt surreal, being trusted with something that big, something that actually mattered. We renamed the company Streamline Technologies. That rebrand went viral, not just in the marketing world, but in the business press too. Forbes ran an article on us calling Streamline one of the top 50 startups to watch. Suddenly, doors that were once closed swung wide open. I was being invited to conferences, interviews, networking events, and somewhere in the middle of all that success, I forgot about her. Or at least I thought I did. But life has a cruel sense of timing, because sometimes, just when you think you've outrun your past, it circles back, not to haunt you, but to test who you've become. It happened in 2021. A job application crossed my desk one morning, a senior marketing position. I wasn't directly in charge of hiring, but I liked reviewing candidates for key roles. The name on the application stopped me cold. Lauren Davis. The same woman who once humiliated me in front of an entire company was now applying for a position at mine. And not just any position, the one reporting directly to me. When I first saw her name on the application, I felt my stomach drop. My fingers froze over the mouse and I just stared at the screen for what felt like minutes. Lauren Davis, same person who had reduced me to a shaking, embarrassed mess in front of my entire former company, same person who had mocked me relentlessly, same person who had made my early career feel like a constant uphill battle. And now, after all these years, she wanted a job at my company. At first, I couldn't believe it. My mind kept looping through the possibilities. Was this some kind of joke? Had she really fallen so far that she was applying to work under me? I even asked myself if maybe, just maybe, the company she worked for had downsized and she was desperate. But the truth didn't matter. What mattered was that she wanted in, and I held the power now. I didn't respond immediately. I closed my laptop, paced around my office at Streamline Technologies, and tried to calm my racing thoughts. Memories of that gala, the laughter, the humiliation, they all came rushing back like an avalanche. I felt a mix of anger, disbelief, and, for the first time in years, a strange satisfaction. Life had a way of leveling the playing field, sometimes in the most unexpected ways. But then came the hard part, figuring out what to do. I couldn't just reject her outright without professional consequences. I had to be careful, strategic. I needed to think through my options without letting emotion dictate my actions entirely, though every cell in my body screamed for revenge. The HR department scheduled an interview. I sat in my office that morning, watching her application again, reading her cover letter. It was polished, typical corporate speak, full of buzzwords about leadership, vision, and innovation. I couldn't help but smirk. She had learned how to craft words, but words alone wouldn't erase the past. The day of the interview, she walked into my office like nothing had happened. Lauren Davis, same sharp suit, same poised smile, same air of self-confidence. For a moment, I just watched her, noting every detail. Her hair had a few streaks of gray, her once pristine appearance slightly less flawless. She looked human. Not that I felt pity, but it was a subtle shift from the untouchable aura she used to have. The interview itself was almost comical. She spoke well, answered questions intelligently, cited her experience, and made a case for why she deserved the role. I could feel the tension in the room, her eyes occasionally flicking to mine, searching for something. Approval, maybe recognition, maybe a hint that I remembered the past. I didn't give her anything. I stayed professional, neutral, calm, the exact opposite of what she had done to me years ago. Inside, though, I was storming. Memories of her laughter at that gala, the way she mocked my every effort, the nicknames, the dismissive smirks, all of it played like a movie reel behind my eyes. I wanted to call her out right there, to humiliate her in the same way she had done to me. But that wasn't me anymore. I wasn't the insecure, desperate young man from Detroit anymore. I was in control. I had power. I had the upper hand, and there were better ways to wield it. After the interview, I excused her and told HR I'd need a few days to decide. I sat alone in my office, thinking through everything. The betrayal of the past didn't just hurt my pride. It had shaped my life. It had motivated me, forced me to work harder, and made me sharper. Every setback Lauren had caused, every insult, every belittling moment had fueled a fire in me. And now, here she was, standing on the doorstep of the very company I had built from scratch. But life isn't just about revenge. It's about the fallout of power, and that's exactly what hit next. News spread quickly within Streamline that Lauren was a candidate. Some employees were shocked. They had heard stories, even if only vaguely. Others were curious, wondering what would happen if someone of her caliber joined the team. Rumors began circulating. People started asking me questions I couldn't exactly answer. The tension was palpable. Every time she showed up in the office for any reason, the room seemed to shift. Conversations hushed. Emails went unanswered until she left. It was like watching history rewrite itself in real time. Only this time, the stakes were higher and the players were reversed. Meanwhile, Lauren seemed oblivious, or maybe deliberately confident. She didn't reach out, didn't try to curry favor. Every time I saw her, I felt a mix of dread and anticipation. Her presence reminded me of all the insecurities I'd carried, all the moments I'd doubted myself. It made me relive the humiliation, the laughter, the nights I'd cried alone in my apartment, questioning whether I had what it took to succeed. And yet, in the middle of all that, a strange realization hit me. I wasn't the same person anymore. Those nights, those moments of weakness had forged me into someone stronger. I wasn't a victim of her cruelty. I was a survivor, a builder, someone who had taken every insult and turned it into fuel. That realization didn't make the past hurt any less, but it did give me clarity. The interview process concluded, and I made my decision. I told HR not to move forward with Lauren's application. Simple, professional, and entirely justified on paper. I didn't need to humiliate her. The rejection itself, coming from me, was enough. But the fallout wasn't over. Lauren didn't take it well. She reached out through LinkedIn, trying to frame it as a misunderstanding, asking for a second chance. I ignored her messages. I knew she was used to getting what she wanted, used to bending situations to her favor. But this time, the power dynamics had flipped. I wasn't afraid of her. I wasn't intimidated. And the idea of giving her another chance felt absurd. Still, watching her struggle to regain control, to assert herself in an environment where she was no longer the alpha, had an unexpected effect on me. Part of me felt vindicated, yes, but another part felt sad. Not for her, not really, but for the person I used to be. The one who had felt small, humiliated, and powerless. That version of me had endured, had learned, had grown. And in a way, seeing her flounder made me appreciate how far I had come. It was around this time that I began to reflect deeply on the past decade of my life. From that first humiliating gala to building Streamline Technologies, into a recognized name in the industry. I thought about all the moments I had wanted to quit, all the nights I'd sat alone, wondering if it was worth it. I realized that every insult, every setback, every laugh at my expense had contributed to the person I had become. Lauren hadn't broken me. She had unknowingly set the stage for my growth. But even with that clarity, the emotional fallout lingered. Some nights, I'd lie awake, thinking about the years I'd wasted on insecurity, on doubting myself because of someone else's cruelty. I wondered how different my life might have been if I'd never encountered her. And yet, I knew the truth. Without those painful moments, I might never have had the fire to build something truly my own. Still, the situation with Lauren was far from resolved. Every encounter, every email, every LinkedIn message reminded me of the delicate balance between power and humility. I had the upper hand now, but I also had the responsibility to wield it wisely. And the question loomed, how far would I go? How much of her downfall, deserved though it was, could I allow myself to take pleasure in before it became something darker? I spent weeks reflecting on it, weighing my options. My team trusted me, my company was thriving, and my reputation had never been stronger. But the shadow of that gala, of her laughter, still lingered. The breaking point wasn't just that she applied for a job. It was realizing that the past wasn't done with me yet. The fallout was a test of my character, and I had to decide what kind of person I wanted to be. One who allowed past pain to dictate my actions, or one who channeled it into something greater. And that's when I began to plan. After weeks of reflection, I realized the only way to handle Lauren wasn't with petty vengeance, at least not directly. Revenge is satisfying in the moment, sure, but fleeting. What I wanted was permanence. What I wanted was proof that the world had shifted, that the scales had finally balanced in a way that couldn't be erased by her charm or ambition. I wanted her to see that I had built something she could only dream of, and that I was the one calling the shots now. It started quietly. I didn't announce anything, didn't make any grand gestures. Instead, I leaned into the parts of my company I had neglected while I was building streamlined technologies from scratch. I invested more into marketing, brought in innovative tech solutions, and expanded our client base internationally. Every decision was deliberate, every move calculated. Not out of malice, but because I wanted the company to reflect everything I had become. Strong, resilient, and untouchable. Meanwhile, Lauren kept reaching out. Emails, LinkedIn messages, even indirect contacts through former colleagues. She tried to charm her way in, emphasizing her years of experience and implying she could bring Streamline to the next level. I ignored her, at least on the surface. Inside, I felt a strange sense of satisfaction. Here was the woman who had once held all the power over me, now asking, pleading, almost begging, for a chance to work under me. Then came the opportunity to turn everything into a statement, one that wouldn't just satisfy my ego, but would secure the legacy I'd been building. In 2022, Streamline Technologies was in talks to acquire a mid-sized marketing firm in New York, a firm that had a solid client base and talented team. The negotiations were complex, delicate, and high stakes. I led the process personally, reviewing every contract, every clause, every risk. And then, in a twist of fate that felt almost scripted, Lauren's name appeared again. She had recently left her last company and had joined that very firm. She was now, indirectly, part of the negotiations. Seeing her there at the negotiating table was surreal. She looked the same. Confident, polished, poised, but the difference was monumental. This time, I was the one with leverage. This time, the power dynamic had flipped entirely. Throughout the negotiations, I maintained professionalism, keeping the interactions strictly business. But I watched her carefully. Every expression, every pause, every carefully chosen word. She tried to assert herself, subtly reminding me of her previous experience, her supposed expertise. But it was different this time. I had context, I had history, and more importantly, I had control. I made sure the deal terms favored us, subtly, legally, ethically, but in a way that meant she had no leverage. She couldn't influence the decision, couldn't sway the board, couldn't undermine me. Every move I made was a reminder, though she didn't see it overtly, that I had risen far above the humiliation she had once imposed on me. After the acquisition closed, I invited her to meet for an integration discussion at our Chicago headquarters. She arrived early, impeccably dressed, carrying herself like she always did, confident, commanding, as if she were walking into a room she owned. But the difference was clear. This wasn't her world anymore. I greeted her politely and we went through the formalities. I asked her about her plans for team integration, her approach to client management, her strategies for growth. She answered well, articulate and professional, but I could see it. The slight hesitation, the flicker of doubt in her eyes. She was measuring me, trying to read the same person she had mocked a decade ago. Only now, there was nothing to read. Later that day, I made the decision I'd been contemplating for months. I offered her a role. Yes, a role, but not what she had been angling for. It was a position far below what her resume suggested, far below her expectations, reporting directly to a team she hadn't managed before, with limited influence. The offer was fair, legal, professional, and completely irreversible. Her face fell when I explained the responsibilities. She tried to mask it, tried to smile through it, but I could see the realization settle in. She was no longer untouchable. The world she had once dominated, or thought she did, had shifted, and she was now a small part of something far bigger than she could control. I didn't gloat. I didn't mock. I simply stated the terms, explained the opportunities, and left the choice to her. She accepted, eventually, but the pride in her step was gone, replaced by a careful, measured composure. That night, I felt a quiet satisfaction, a kind of closure that didn't need fanfare or spectacle. I hadn't humiliated her publicly. I had done better. I had grown beyond the need to humiliate anyone at all. In the following months, as she integrated into the team, I watched her adapt, struggle, and adjust to the reality that this company wasn't hers. And in those moments, I realized something profound. The story wasn't about revenge. It was about transformation, about the power of perseverance, resilience, and the quiet strength that comes from refusing to be defined by someone else's cruelty. Every time I walked through the halls of Streamline, I remembered the early days, the late nights, the failures, the humiliation, and I felt grateful. Grateful for the fire she had unknowingly lit inside me, for the relentless drive that her ridicule had sparked. It had been the catalyst for everything I had built, for the person I had become. By the end of 2023, Streamline Technologies was no longer just a company. It was a testament to resilience, to quiet ambition, to the kind of determination that doesn't seek immediate vindication but builds something lasting, something undeniable. And in the corner of my mind, there was always Lauren, a reminder of the past, a marker of the journey, a symbol of the power that comes from taking control of your own story. I had turned the tables. I had rewritten the script. And for the first time in years, I felt completely free. By 2024, Streamline Technologies had grown beyond anything I could have imagined back in those early Detroit days. Our offices spanned 3 cities. Our client base included international brands, and our team had doubled in size. Walking through the Chicago headquarters, I sometimes caught myself smiling at the scale of what I had built. A company that, 10 years ago, existed only as a dream scribbled on the back of a notebook in my tiny apartment. Lauren was still with us, though in a far smaller, more contained role than she had ever expected. She was competent, I'll give her that, but she wasn't running anything, wasn't shaping strategy, wasn't in a position to control outcomes. And I didn't need to remind her of the past. She remembered. The humiliation of that gala, the years of struggle I endured after her mockery, and now, seeing me sit at the top, she couldn't ignore it. The balance had shifted in a way words could never convey. For me, the real victory wasn't the professional dominance or the small satisfaction of seeing her humbled. It was the personal transformation. I had spent years turning pain into motivation, criticism into clarity, setbacks into stepping stones. Every sleepless night, every rejection, every instance of ridicule had contributed to the person I was today. And the beautiful, almost ironic part was this. The person I had become didn't need to hurt anyone to feel powerful. My success itself was the statement, loud and undeniable. I remember one quiet evening, sitting in my office overlooking the Chicago River, sipping a cup of coffee and reflecting on the journey. The city lights twinkled across the water, 1,000 tiny sparks reflecting the complexity of life, ambition, and human resilience. I thought about that first night at the gala, about the laughter and humiliation that had once crushed me, and I realized something I hadn't fully appreciated before. Those moments weren't just obstacles. They were lessons. They were fire-forging character, testing my resolve, shaping me into someone capable of holding the reins of my own destiny. I also thought about Lauren. Not with anger, not with bitterness, but with a strange sense of closure. Life had dealt her challenges too, though in a different way. The irony wasn't lost on me. The woman who once tried to diminish me had inadvertently fueled the drive that made me untouchable. And in that irony, there was justice, not of a petty, vengeful kind, but of the kind that comes from rising, unbroken, and creating something enduring. By the end of that year, I had the company not just running smoothly but expanding into new markets, implementing AI-driven marketing analytics that positioned Streamline as a leader in innovation. The accolades came, as did invitations to conferences, media appearances, and panels. I found myself mentoring young professionals who reminded me of the 23-year-old me, ambitious, nervous, raw, with potential. And I made a conscious effort to teach them the lessons I had learned: resilience over pride, patience over impulsive reaction, focus over distraction, and the value of turning every challenge into fuel for growth. And in those moments, I understood something profound. The story wasn't really about Lauren at all. It was about me, my journey, my growth, and the strength it took to transform humiliation into power. The truth was, I didn't need to own her in any literal sense. My success, my accomplishments, and the life I had built were far greater than any fleeting moment of revenge. They were enduring, they were visible, and they were unshakable. Sometimes, when I walk through the offices and see new employees bustling with energy, I catch glimpses of the past. Not Lauren, but the feeling of being small, overlooked, dismissed, and I smile quietly, knowing that those moments don't define anyone forever. They can break you, yes, or they can push you toward something greater. I chose the latter. I always chose the latter. I still remember the day I finally allowed myself to close the chapter fully. It wasn't dramatic. No grand speech, no public confrontation, no vindictive spectacle. Just me, sitting at my desk, watching a team meeting unfold seamlessly without me needing to intervene, and realizing that the story of humiliation, of struggle, of pain, was now behind me. The narrative had shifted. I was no longer a character in someone else's story. I was the author of my own, writing every line, every twist, every outcome. Lauren eventually left the company quietly, moving on to a smaller firm where she could regain some control and rebuild her own career. I heard about it later through mutual contacts. I didn't gloat. I didn't celebrate. But I allowed myself a private acknowledgement. Her departure didn't matter. What mattered was the journey I had taken to get here. The laughter, the humiliation, the long nights of doubt and struggle. They had all been necessary steps to reach this point, and at last I felt free. Sitting here now, looking back, I can say with certainty that every painful moment, every setback, and every injustice I faced was part of a larger story. My story. The kind that's not about instantaneous triumph, but about persistence, growth, and the quiet, undeniable satisfaction of building something of lasting value. I once believed that humiliation could define me, that a single night of ridicule could cast a shadow over my entire life. But it didn't. Not because the world changed, not because she faltered, but because I did. And that is a lesson I carry with me every day. The people who try to diminish you are only as powerful as the energy you give them. Refuse to give it. Focus on your growth, and life has a way of delivering justice quietly, profoundly, and permanently. And sometimes, years later, when you're standing on top of the life you've built, you look back and realize the person who humiliated you didn't break you. They were merely the spark that lit the fire. And that fire? It's unstoppable. The end.